Diana, is there? So welcome, everyone. Welcome to Educating Changemakers. This session is part of the Skoll World Forum's Ecosystem Day and is wholly curated and hosted by Ashoka. I'm Kyle Zimmer. I'm an Ashoka board member and co-founder and on the executive team of a nonprofit social enterprise called First Book. First Book is focused on educational equity, and our work is driven by a network of more than 530,000 educators who serve children ages 0 to 18 from low-income families across the US and Canada. This means everyone from schools to homeless shelters to healthcare settings and even barber shops. We listen to this unprecedented community through our research arm, First Book Research and Insights, which tells us what's going on in the lives of kids in need and what their educators need to serve them. Through the First Book Marketplace, our nonprofit e-commerce site, we provide books, ebooks, and a wide range of other educational resources for free or at very low cost. We provide 15 to 17 million books annually, just to give you a sense of our size. And we also provide a range of other expert-informed resources. Now, in 2021, our First Book Research and Insights surveyed our educators about the value of change making to their students, and the results were eye-opening. 76% of educators serving low-income populations believe that developing change-maker mindsets among the young people they serve is an urgent matter. And only 29% of educators feel adequately prepared to develop their students as change-makers. So we have work to do. So First Book acted on this information by building a partnership with Ashoka, funded by Odema Pige, that will help educators bring change making to the children they serve. So here is the reality we're facing. Change making is the most important topic that you're going to hear about. It is important because sparking change making is central to democracy and to equity at every level. Change making is critical to the future of individual kids. It's essential to our communities and our world. And it's also an important strategy to address the mental well-being of our youth, which is an increasingly urgent issue. But it doesn't stop there. It's vital to empowering our educators, formal and informal. They need to see the impact of sparking change making too. So we're here today with an extraordinary group of people who are at the forefront of change making and sparking change making all over the world. And they're going to teach us about change making and how to instill change making in the next generation. I've got to say, I was amazed. I was reading your bios, all of you, and it took my breath away. It really did. I could hardly sit in my chair last night. I was so excited about getting to meet you and learn your stories. So what I'd like to do is kick that off. I want to remind our viewers that your bios have been made available, and so I want everybody to dig into those, because I want everyone to have that same sensation of not being able to sit in their chairs. But I wanted to start maybe Ali with you and ask the question, how did you start? How did you begin your journey as a change maker?
Well, thank you so much. How I started my change-making journey, when I look back 25 years ago, when I completed my master's in political science from Government College Lahore, I decided to join a non-profit institution to gain some experience. I entered the field of youth development accidentally. I never wanted to enter the field of youth development. Honestly, I wanted to become a civil servant like my brother. So what happened, I joined this field and I decided to learn as much as possible through my work. And very soon I realized that the work we were doing at that time were basically meeting the needs of the society. So I started developing frustration. And at that time, what happened, when I was about to leave the field of youth development, I was able to discover something amazing. I was trying to help a migrated community to set up a school for those children who were out of school with the help of young girls who were at that time 13 years old, 14 years old, 15 years old. And these girls within no time were able to mobilize over 400 kids. And they started serving as teachers, counselor administrators. And I was blown away by this idea. I was completely shocked by this power shown by young people. How could these young people who were not even counted able to mobilize such a big audience, and how they started this? So I started working on this idea, started thinking about it. What is this that really made this possible? And then I realized that change making is the biggest missing link right now in education institutions. And then I realized that this power is totally not felt and not realized by these stakeholders. And it's the least used capacity of human beings, especially young people. And it's the biggest deficit in education institutions, the society. And find out that society is the custodian of this power. And unfortunately, efforts to use this power were not existent. So I decided to address this deficit. And I decided to launch a campaign in Pakistan to at least provide one opportunity to every young person to experience the thrill of being a change maker. I realized very soon that all young people are born with this incredible power to drive change in the society. And it's the paradigm of mistrust that veils it. And if you remove this paradigm of mistrust, you are always surprised by the change-making power shown by these young people. And I started working from one community, and within no time, I was able to demonstrate the model in many communities of Pakistan. In 2008, I decided to take an institutional approach. And I was able to start working with institutions. And today, when I'm talking to you, we have launched this concept in over 1,200 institutions. We have invented a very simple, scalable method to turn young people into change makers. After testing with several thousand young people across the country, we have tested this model in Germany, in Zimbabwe, in Kenya with the same results. We have shown through our work that all young people, irrespective of their gender, of their socioeconomic status, they're fully capable of driving change if challenged respectfully and if trusted. You see, I personally feel that trust is the most important part and a most important tool to help young people to become change makers. And when I look at my journey, education doesn't help me to become change maker, to be very honest. It basically stops me to become a change maker. It was my mother who really inspired me to become change maker. I was very lucky that I was raised in a family where I saw my mother giving back to the society. She launched this school 40 years ago for underserved children, and she ran this for almost 30 years. So, my belief system was basically inspired by the belief system of my mother. She installed a very positive belief system in me. And when I look at my education, I think, this education doesn't help me to develop an ownership of the society. It doesn't help me to develop ownership of myself. It only rewards mental obedience. And, I was very lucky that I was raised in a family where I saw my mother giving back. And finally, I was able to find my own power. And I decided to dedicate my life to help other young people to find their power.
Fabulous. That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Dina, do you want to jump in and tell us when you became a change maker?
Yes, absolutely. And very, very inspiring to hear your story, Ali. So I have thought a lot about this, and I always think there are two major forces that led me to have this life full of purpose. One, I think, is the background of my family. My 4 grandparents escaped, 1 from Ukraine and 3 from Poland, basically from discrimination, for being who they were. And so I think it was not obvious that I was going to be in a country like Mexico and being free to go to school and to be who I am. And that always took me in a very important reflection of like why would anyone have to escape, no, to be who they are? And that is very much intrinsic in the education we receive. And the other factor from a different nature is like my journey through school. And I bet it's very much like many of your journeys, is a very passive education where you sit and receive information. And I was always like, I couldn't sit still. I needed to move to learn and to play to learn. And it wasn't mostly the case. And I wonder, like, why wouldn't there be like a more active and inspiring and curiosity nurturing education? And so I just had this opportunity to go to like a Boys and Girls Scouts as I was growing up. And I thought, this is not informal education. This is like a possible education, right? And why is this not like in your everyday in school? And I saw how the counselors were really happy and excited and really pushing, like making kids feel loved and seen, and also like challenging them to bring like their, as Ali says, like their change making possibilities. And so I started like with a friend and realized immediately that there was so much potential in such diverse contexts, no, from ranging from the mountains with indigenous kids in the north of Mexico, the Raramuris, or talking about like the coast in the southeast of Mexico, or the southernmost tip in Patagonia, or if we're talking about any place, any human being has this just very natural desire to be happy. And how are you happy? When you do something for your community, when you discover your possibility and the role that you have to play in this life from wherever you are from today. And that goes for every age. So I think those are the seeds.
That's fabulous. That's great. And there are some threads you can hear from you to Ali, and so that's really exciting too. I want to pursue that. But Mathias, can you jump in and tell us a bit about your story?
Yes, I'm glad to share the story. It's always fun, and it all started at the age of 10 when I realized that there were so many children that could go to school in my own neighborhood, but I was not sent to school because my father thought going to school was going to take me away from the farm, and he didn't want to waste his money in sending a boy like me to school. I was just good for the farm, just like my 9 elder brothers and sisters. They were all in the farm. I was child number 10 out of 16. And but I had to decide on my own to go to school. And that was taking the very highest risks because my father was not going to pay the school fees, and they will always carve a portion of the farm work for me to do. And I chose to do that. I'll go early in the morning to the farm, and then from the farm to the school, from school back home. And now how will I pay school fees? At that age 10, I learned to work for people for a fee. So what I get from other people's farm, I pay my school fees. And at that age, I also realized that there are so many other children that are like me. The parents, we are not buoyant enough to send them to school. So I now gather them in a group. What if we help cultivate my farm, my portion today, do your portion tomorrow, and then go to another person and get school fees and then pay for one another? And so I had a team. We started working to get money to pay for ourselves, and that kept me going. But it was just like a sport, and I enjoy it all through the elementary school to the secondary school. And to the time I finished university, I know that I work for people to get money. My parents never asked me, how do you pay school fees? Nobody cares. And I never asked anybody because I believe I'll always work. But it never moved me until when I started work in 1995. And going that way, of course, My mother was always giving me the support. She believed that I could do anything. So anything I want to do, I tell her, this is what I want to do. She said, if you believe in it, go ahead, you do it. While I wanted to put young people together to work in groups, to say, if you believe it will work, go ahead. And so my mother had always given me that motivation, and I enjoyed it so much. So when I moved into the city of Kaduna, I moved in with that belief in the change-making potential in young people. And I have always seen myself as a bridge that will link young people to their dreams. So I picked up a job with one of the fastest growing consulting firms in the state. And that's where I worked very hard within the first year to become the lead panelist to the company, conducting interviews for the company. And I was very happy because in that position, I'll start helping young people that I've always carried in my own mind. But that position exposed me to a lot of emotional stress and pain, because anytime I sit down to write recommendation to employers about candidates we interviewed, I find out that I'll be struggling. I interview a lot of young people who have wonderful certificates, but they don't have the skills that employers are looking for. Therefore, meaning I cannot help them. And my frustration reached its peak when I discovered that it was not the candidate's fault, it was a curricular content issue. And that was my turning point from that ambitious work, from my normal job into what I am doing now. That was when I started Hub Builders. I had to draw a curriculum. What is the problem with the education that is making young people have certificates without skills? How do we get young people to acquire skills? How do we prepare young people who are already in school to have skills in case they come out, and even if nobody is giving them employment, they will be able to create something for themselves. So I started what I'm doing right now as far back as to 1997, but I didn't call it Hub Builders until 2002, when I named it Hub Builders, because we started with my curriculum, partnering with universities to run entrepreneurship courses for young people, trying to get what they have in their brains, put it in paper. And when they put it in paper, the likelihood is that they are going to succeed on it. And that way we have disrupted government policies in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria, and have caused a lot of shifts in the education in this very country. And we are still moving. So we started with the universities to the middle school, and we are now focusing on age 6 as they start from the cradle to see us moving. So that's just my story.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Starting at age 10 is spectacular. It's spectacular. And we have one more to hear from. Aleta, can you join us and share your story?
Sure, Kyle, thank you so much. And wonderful hearing from my colleagues, your extraordinary stories of becoming and being a change maker. For me, I think I knew I wanted to be a change maker for a long time, but it took a while before I realized that the way to be a change maker for me was to become a teacher. And that, as I reflect back on it, that started in my own experience in school. I grew up outside of Washington, D.C., here in the U.S., went to, by all conventional measures, a very high quality school, an excellent school, but a school that, like you all have described, that really prized my obedience and compliance. And like most students, I wanted to do really well in school. And so I did what I was told, and I got really good grades, kind of giving the answer that the teacher was looking for, and almost at the expense, not almost, really at the expense of in many ways developing my own creativity and critical thinking. But I was fortunate to have one extraordinary teacher who taught me, who demanded really that I think for myself. And I realized how different that was from my experience in other classrooms. And when I graduated from college, my very first job was working with teaching playwriting to a group of high schoolers in the juvenile justice system here in Washington, D.C., at a time when our city was really, really struggling, reeling under the crack cocaine epidemic, and dealing with gang violence. It was a very, very frightening time to be a young person in DC. And what I saw from the young people in my program was amazing creativity, productivity. They wrote a play that addressed the city's extraordinary problems. They held a panel with city leaders and made recommendations to the city leaders, who then asked them to head up a youth panel to continue to make and implement recommendations for our city. And I thought, well, how is it that these young people have such extraordinary talents and creativity and ability, but they weren't nurtured in school? And that experience convinced me that the way that I might be able to make a contribution was to become a teacher. And I did. I went to grad school, got my teaching credential, taught in public school for several years, and I loved teaching students. To this day, it is still my favorite thing to do. But I was really overwhelmed by the complacency that I experienced among so many of my teaching colleagues, who were not to be faulted. Teachers do what the job expects, and the job of a teacher, what society expects in the US and in most places in the world, is you are an information provider. You tell kids stuff and they remember it, and you test them on it, make sure they remembered it, and then you move on to the next content area. And I wanted very much to change the way we expect teachers to do their jobs and offer teachers a different role. And so in 1995, I founded my NGO that I still lead today, called Center for Inspired Teaching. And what we do is we teach teachers to shift their role from information provider to instigator of thought. And the reason that we want to make that change is because our ultimate goal is to shift the norm in school from the compliance-based school that prizes obedience to an experience that's truly engagement-based, where student agency is valued and becomes the norm. And of course, that agency is central to change making. And the way that I work with teachers is an unusual way. We teach teachers through improvisation so that they can become better communicators of content and also better able to engage with students in a respectful way and build relationships based on mutual respect.
Fantastic. It sounds like you and I started our organizations at about the same time in Washington, D.C. So these are great background stories so that we understand who you are and what you've built. And I guess I'd like to pull us now up into, sort of a discussion of the field of change making, and that you are central pillars. You're central architects of, and I want to also encourage you to talk to each other. I'm listening to the description of how the classrooms were running from Aleta, and I'm thinking, I don't want to have that be the way that this runs this morning. So what I'd like to do is just toss out a question, and and please jump in. Don't wait to be called on. I will pick on you if you don't jump in, but other than that, I'd really love for you just to step up. The first question, and partly I'm putting myself in the role of someone who might be skeptical, someone who's listening to this session and might be saying, really? Are we not doing that, or what's the difference? So I'm going to ask a few questions along that path. So one is, how do you know it works? What are the metrics of success? How do we know that we're making progress? Anyone want to step up?
Sure.
Yeah, actually.
Hi, please go ahead, Ali.
Okay. When I look at my work, I immediately get this impression after participation, of young people in the program that, yes, this program is really helping them to establish their own identities. It is really helping communities to meet the unmet service needs of society. It is helping educational institutions to connect with the society. You see, change making is a win-win strategy for everyone, for young people, for educational institutions, for society. Because just look at the size of youth population right now. We have a youth quake in this world, and half of the youth population, more than half of the youth population, is living in developing countries, and where there is no, platform for them to go out and develop this change-making skills. So there is, the moment they get this opportunity, when they go out and they develop the skill, they immediately establish their own identities. They are able to find the purpose of their life. On the other side, when you look at the kind of projects, when I look at the projects young people are doing on the ground, although they are very small in scale, but they, it has a macro implications. Because most of the problems today we are solving, big problems we are solving, were small at one point. And these young people, when are engaged in change making, they immediately start fixing small problems. And then we see the impact on the community straight away. Many communities where we have launched this, they have highly rated this program. British Council done a third-party evaluation of our work, and they came to know that 71% of young people who participated were able to either find a job, or they were able to set up their own enterprises immediately after participating in the change-making competitions we carried out. On the other side, you just look at the educational institutions. Educational institutions, especially in Pakistan, they're completely disconnected from the society. You see, they are not seen, they are not heard, they're not taking the ownership of the society. You see what happened the moment you engage, engage young people in change making, they immediately connect with the society, and they start making visibility of the institution, and that is something seriously missing. And what happens that this institution, which was closed down before, suddenly start making partnerships with many external stakeholders. And in my 25 years of journey, I've seen that whenever institution opens a gate for change making, it immediately opens a gate for partnership, for new opportunities. They align themselves for new structures, for new partnerships, for new resources. And many institutions which started this program, within 2-3 years, I have seen that they have grown this program to very high level. And they started from one department, they have taken engaged many other disciplines. So I see that this program has multi-dimensionally impact in it. And perhaps this is the reason that it has a broader appeal than any other program, because in social entrepreneurship, we tend to focus only on big ideas. We try to engage young people who are either business students or economics studies students. But in change making, this is not a department specific. We take a whole campus approach. We want everybody to be engaged in that process. And maybe it's a short experience, but at the end of the day, what happens, we create the culture of change making within this institution, and that culture basically helps us to change the framework within the institution.
Great, thanks. I know, Dina, you were jumping up, right?
Thank you. And also in relation to what Ali mentions, I very much believe that the success lies in everybody, teachers and kids of all ages, and the families, caregivers, the whole community really has the opportunity to understand why they care about this, about any issue that they are worried about, and or that they see but may feel that they have nothing to offer or to do about it. So I think it's essential to think about the process of how we learn this. It's not only to be problem solvers. Okay, yes, equip everyone to be problem solvers, yes, but I want to emphasize the deep transcendence of how we do that. And so I think the success lies in people feeling like they are happy as they learn this, like they are experiencing joy, and they're experiencing, like as Aleta was saying, creativity, the possibility to be critical thinkers, and the possibility to team up with others to accomplish whatever they put their minds to. And so we have seen throughout the 15 years of education for sharing, the first 15 years, that, for example, indicators that we measure like empathy, have a really important increase, 42 percentage points across the board. The fair play, so values like fair play is, yes, it's very important to solve problems, but not at any expense or at anyone's expense. If it's essential that we do this with civic values in practice. So the fair play, for example, has increased 41% across the board. Civic duty, to understand what impact can your participation have. No, so civic duty, 63% increase. We are talking about very young kids, but we're also talking about like elementary school kids age 6 or 7. But we're also talking essentially about what Aleta was mentioning, which is the teachers. The teachers are usually forgotten. And so when we revalue the person of the teacher, the role of the teacher, the role of the kid, the role of the parent, it's like a re-evaluation to reappreciate, to appreciate really what do they bring each one of the roles, and in a way that they feel that they can experience joy and iterate and create meaning, create value as they go. I think that's why it's successful, because we see kids that teachers are telling us that want to go to school, to go back to school after the pandemic, when there is going to be an education for sharing session, because they will experience joy. And so I think we can't forget like the person, you know, in this change-making process, and care about the emotions that are involved.
Does anyone else want to jump up?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Great.
And thank you, Dina and Ali, for the incredibly important comments you've made. As I think we're all hearing, this is hard to measure. It's much easier to measure how many, you know, how many months of reading you've advanced in over a period of time. And we're talking about something much more important and much more complicated. And so at Inspired Teaching, we've gone out of our way to do our best to quantify it in a way that can explain to Kyle, your point is so important. There are so many skeptics and we need to be able to tell our stories. So some of the indicators we've looked at over the years where we've seen real positive change is time dealing with discipline. So when teachers embrace this, we call it the role of instigator of thought, but I think we're all talking about the same kind of education. When teachers teach in a way where that fosters student agency and learning through play, there's a lot less time dealing with discipline problems and a stronger sense of belonging among the students. And therefore there's more time for instruction. We see higher job satisfaction for teachers and higher teacher retention. And of course, there's all sorts of research that shows in pretty much any field, if you like your job and you feel valued and you're looking forward to going to work, you're going to be more effective than if you're unhappy and sort of slogging through your job. We see deeper learning and understanding in the content areas. And it's interesting to note we've gotten recognition in a lot of ways, including from school districts. One of our teachers a few years ago was named the Washington, DC Public Schools Teacher of the Year, and attributes a lot of her teaching style to her learning with Inspired Teaching. My colleague Michelle, who's with us today, will put in the chat a piece that Jan, the teacher, wrote a few years ago about that experience. That's just one point to illustrate it. Another thing that we see as an important result is the ability of teachers to be more flexible, the increased what is called uncertainty tolerance. And my goodness, in the past 2+ years, that's been extraordinarily important as we've supported teachers with the transition to online learning, back to in-person, back to online, back to in-person, et cetera, and transitioned all of our professional learning, which is highly engaging, to online. We ourselves have had to be able to say, well, we've never done this before. Let's see how we can navigate it. But that learning to have that strong uncertainty tolerance has been a really important outcome. And finally, we do a lot of surveying of students and teachers on whether or not they like school. And we see a real change from the sort of conventional attitude that happens in many places of school as something you have to just get through and get it over with, to a place people actually, kids and adults, really want to be. And that's the impetus for a resource that we share with teachers and changemakers that we'll also stick in the chat, called Hooray for Monday. And the reason it's entitled that is because if school were as it should be, we'd all wake up on Monday mornings and say, oh my gosh, I get to learn and play and be creative and do important change-making work. And so that's what we're working to make happen.
Fabulous. So Mathias, did you want to, I see you turned your mic on.
Yes.
Want to jump in?
Yes. Yeah, I just want to add to what my colleagues have said. I'm very much in agreement with that. You know, taking us back to our starting point. Our starting point was why university graduates have certificates without the skills, without working skills or complementing skills. And our own problem was the risks involved in having young people out there with certificates, but nothing. Now we feel that failure to absorb new entrants into the workforce or into productive employment was a very high risk of exposing these young people to being drawn to violent crimes and conflicts all over. And our definition of education, which I also believe is not just our definition, but we feel is the purpose of education anywhere, anytime, is to enrich the learner and by extension, the community or the society. So we teach young people how to apply their knowledge to everyday living and also to lead change that they want to see in their communities or in their own lives. And as at December 2021, we are trying to have our reports. We have reached out directly besides the institutions that we've reached out to. We've reached out and engaged 28,200 young people in northern Nigeria. And the alumni of this program has produced, they've started about 7,240 enterprises in northern Nigeria, and they have provided employment to 28,960 young people. So we believe that education should be able to cater for young people and not just young people being able to create their own jobs and then employ others instead of just carrying the certificates and looking around. So asking the question, are we moving forward? Yes, the success is great. The impact is huge. And that is the motivating factor that is keeping us moving. Okay, we started from the university students, so those that are lower and even those that are outside the school system, and now thinking of those that are just starting the kindergarten. What do we give them so that they start up at that early age? So it is huge. And when we came to the pandemic, it also opened us to a new phase completely, where we started what is called community incubation centers, that is bringing parents into the classroom, policymakers into the classroom, and then everybody. I don't know whether I have the little time just to share the concept of the incubation center, just two pictures for us to see. I don't know if I can have it right here at the moment.
We can come back to it.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Just that, it's good.
Because I want to make sure that we really think as a field. I think as you know, every single one of your models is compelling, and just listening to the impact stories, you can hear leadership among young people, starting businesses, employing themselves, employing others, being engaged in their community, being creative, being thoughtful and critical thinkers. These are all essential ingredients to democracy, to equity, and to self-determination. And so it's absolutely inspiring to hear you describe the impact. And I guess I think listening to that, it couldn't be clearer to me that this is something we all should be racing toward. But we know there are barriers. We know there are barriers, and they're going to be different based in part on where we are geographically, culturally. There are going to be substantial barriers. But I wondered if I handed each of you a magic wand, and I do have magic wands. So if I hand each of you a magic wand and I said, you can change two things in your in the field that you believe are the biggest changes that would make this a normal practice, this would become the normal way to grow up in your communities, in your country, or even at the global level, what would the 2 changes be that you would make?
Well, I would say, the one thing I would say, I need to change immediately is to redefine the success for young people. Because the way we define success in our society is holding young people back. We have excluded a massive amount of young people with incredible power to affect the society positively by defining intelligence through exams. I have learned through my experience that academic intelligence is not enough. Staying away from problems is not enough. Making less mistakes is not enough. Speaking a foreign language is not enough. We need to define success in terms of change making. I'm about to finish my 3rd book, which is on redefining success for young people, in which I've tried to basically present this, as a new model for success, defining success, because I feel that society has been following a very outdated definition of success. And this definition is holding young people back. Just think about it. When we define success in terms of academic success, what happens, you hold young people back for at least 2 decades of their life. What scares me the most today, that the age of school living is getting higher and higher. And when young people come out of educational institutions, they're already in their high 30s. So they have spent almost the entire youth period in educational institutions doing nothing. Education is taking place in ivory towers, where the residents of these towers have no idea of the deprivations, of the helplessness, of the sufferings faced by the people living outside the walls of this tower. This education has a very anti-educational effect on the society. And this education impoverishes young people. And I really wanted to redefine success in terms of change making. We need to define success in terms of change making, so that we can bring large number of young people back to the society. We can reintegrate them socially and economically. I've seen in my life young people who have a very modest linguistic skills or mathematical skills were able to find a way to add value in the society. They were very good at spotting opportunities to see what is missing in the society. When I experimented this 4 years ago, where I engaged 6,000 young people from the most underserved communities of Pakistan who were provided scholarships. When I engaged them for 4 weeks, within no time they were able to rise above from poverty. They were able to find way to add value in the society. They produce products and services which are seriously missing in the society. So I found out that we have imposed unwanted poverty on young people, and there is no precondition to become a change maker. I believe that everyone is born with this change making kit. You have to use this, but unfortunately educational institutions don't give you or give this permission to you to use this kit. And I've met so many young people who believe they are most educated people on the earth, and they have never ever used the power of imagination. They have never ever produced something for the society. We need to change the definition of a graduate. When we call someone a graduate, it should mean that this person has changed some lives. This person has produced something valuable for the society. It should not mean that this person knows a lot of material and he has done something very well in academics. So I think unless and until we redefine success, we never be able to reintegrate large number of young people into the society.
Ali, I should have known better than to have given a restricted question to a group of social entrepreneurs, right? I think you took your magic wand to about 20 items, if my count is still running. I'm just teasing you. It's a brilliant answer because it's a systemic answer, and it reminds us that the barriers, the things that need to be changed, run deep in I think almost every culture. So how about anybody else? Would you like to take your magic wand and go after a couple of barriers?
Yes, just like Ali, first we need to redefine what success is in terms of learning. Just as I said earlier, I want to share this very picture. I don't know, can you see this now? Now, this is what we designed during the pandemic, calling it incubation centers. I hope all of you can see it now. Now look at the center of it, the nucleus of it, we call it Community Incubation Center. Now in the center, you see children there, you see parents there, you see community leaders there, and this is bringing everybody here. Now we believe that when everybody comes together, we strengthen one another and we prepare ourselves, and everybody has an eye on what the community issues are that we all can work. And so when we come together like this, of course, everybody has something to offer. Those who are good in the IT bring in something from the IT, and those who can go research in the library bring out their own research. And then we make sure that everyone is able to do something, and the output here or the outcome is everybody is able to do something for the good of the society. Everybody is a giver and everybody is a taker at that level. So what this is giving us is that we should bring down the walls of the classroom and make it an all-inclusive thing. Bring down the walls of the classroom. Every teacher is a learner and every learner is a teacher, but this way, the parents at home, they have something to offer in building the children to become what they want. And then every teacher also has something, the kids also have something. So learning becomes an all-inclusive kind of a thing. And so this gives us all the circles that we have in one place. And for us, this is what we achieve when we bring out the walls or bring down the walls of the classroom. Of course, it encourages openness, transparency, and integrity, and it gives us also effective collaboration. It breaks down the age limits that we have. It breaks down the barrier of the social classes that we have, the cultural classes that we have, the economic classes that we have, and then everybody is working hard to give out something, and everybody prepares himself or herself to receive something from the person that is given. So for us here, we work to ensure that the boundaries or the walls are down, and then everybody is able to give out something, and everybody is trusting everybody to give something, and everybody is ready to receive something from everybody. So that way the community goes, we learn together and we grow together.
Okay. That's fabulous, Mathias. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and being specific with your own model. Dina.
I love what everything that you're saying, Mathias. I think we all resonate deeply. And to your question, Kyle, I think all of us here feel, I dare to say all of us feel like we have a magic wand. And what we want is for everybody to feel like they also have a magic wand. So that I think encompasses like the magic wand. But also I think if I may also share maybe like just one image of what does having a magic wand feels like, is like having the belief in action that there is something we can do for teachers and mothers that you see in this photo to have fun as they discover how to create games to teach about climate change. You may see some bandanas and balls, but what you are really seeing here is they are designing a whole system to bring water. Each ball of that you see is 10,000 liters of water. They're bringing water from one community to another, and they have to work together to do that. And so ultimately, my magic wand has to do with learning to unlearn, to really unlearn, not only to adapt, but really to unlearn and to see the possibilities that lie within each person and what happens when they connect the possibilities of each person with the other. And so if the magic wand entails having a different kind of upbringing for every role, for teachers, for parents, for kids, where they learn through play and develop and unleash their creativity, their curiosity, their potential, and with this, how they develop different kind of relationships. how to develop a relationship that really matters, where you are, again, seen and heard and loved, but that where you also realize that you are able to address the greatest global challenges from your community. So I think that's my magic wand, that everybody has a magic wand.
Oh, Dina, I love that. And it's such a beautiful image. And it speaks to something I'm sure we all encounter, which is that it can't be that everybody has to be willing to be extremely courageous in order for this change to happen. And I say that after close to 30 years of working with teachers and challenging them to be revolutionary in their ways of teaching. And on the one hand, I'm delighted by the thousands of teachers who've been willing and joyfully excited to join that movement. But that's not the way we're going to institutionalize change. So if I had my magic wand that we hope everyone has someday, I would say the first thing I would look to change is our societal expectation of what school is. And that's particularly, it's a new audience that at Inspired Teaching we've been reaching out to because we're realizing how important they are. Parents, if your child hates learning history or math, there's nothing wrong with your child. Something needs to change about the school. And too often as parents, we say, well, I didn't really like that either, so it's fine. So that's one thing I would change, is the parental expectations of school. And then the other thing I would change, so that teachers didn't have to be out on their own being change makers, is the way that teachers are prepared and trained and supported while they're in the profession. And I'm gonna, like my colleagues, share a very quick, I think it's about a 30-second video that illustrates what we hope will happen for everybody. Schools are set up to hurry students through their education, cram as much information into them as possible, instead of being set up to build student fascination with knowledge and creative thinking. The objective of Center for Inspired Teaching is to transform the school experience for students from one that is essentially passive to one that is active and engaged. Instead of having teachers who do the thinking for you, you as a student get to learn how to think in school. Our teacher training is based in improvisational theater. We teach teachers to say yes and, to step outside their comfort zone, because that's where learning takes place. So Dina, we have to do some teacher training together. I think it would be amazing. Imagine if every teacher, if that was just what teacher training looked like, we'd be in a very, very different place in terms of how school looks for kids.
Fabulous. Really, you guys, there are so many great threads. I'm struggling with which one to grab next, but let me give it a chance or a try. The changes you guys are promoting, devoting your lives to, are profound, and they take moving major institutions, right? Educational institutions. Every one of you has focused, at least in part, on formal educational institutions. You're talking about the parent population too, and the importance of that. I can imagine that and you're talking about teacher training. So probably talking about schools of education. And I get, so, and there are probably policy implications, like I can imagine these are some of the most difficult to shift sets of institutions perhaps in the world, right? And I guess my question is, who needs to be in the room? Who needs to be in the room? Because the thrilling part is that you have been pioneers. You're out there, you're pushing, you've got teachers, in training in your programs. But if we're gonna get the lever long enough to move the world on its axis, we've got to have specific groups of people in the room. So who is that, and how do we get them on the next panel discussion as either active participants or as at a minimum, to be part of the audience? Because I really think that as much as I love individual programs, and they're essential, that if we're moving the world on its axis, we've got to be eyeball to eyeball with people who are running these gigantic pieces, and we have to approach it from grassroots and from grass tops. So, what am I right about that? I'm happy to be wrong. I have a lot of experience being wrong in my life. So, can we talk about that? Are there strategies that we might approach for that?
Kyle, in addition to the folks you mentioned who are critically important, decision makers, legislators, whoever represents parents, that's something I'm trying to get a handle on, critically important. I also think there's a role for economists, because there is, I can make the case in a very sort of a layperson's way, but someone could make it much better, that we know, right, if you invest in education, you have all sorts of economic benefits. And there are both beautiful studies and horrifying ones, including in the US, where people still, I believe, we look at this reading scores of third graders to predict the number of prison beds we'll need 10 years later. So there's some horrifying work out there being done that shows the impact of investing in education. But what I haven't seen done is a study that looks at not just should we educate kids, of course we know the answer to that, but how should we educate young people? And that's what we're talking about here, right? If you take a group of third graders and do drill and kill for however many hours, you'll have some benefits, and also, as Ali so beautifully articulated, some real drawbacks, because you may teach them what they should not do, and you may teach them not to use their imaginations. But if you take that same group of students and allow them to learn through play, or encourage them to learn through play, and build their imaginations along with their intellects, there will be surely extraordinary economic benefits, as well as, of course, social and philosophical benefits. And I would love to see that be measured, not just should we educate young people, but how should we educate young people, and what the economic benefits of a student-centered learning experience will be in the short term and in the long term. So I'd love economists, finance folks in the room for those conversations.
It's really funny, because I completely agree with you, Aleta, and it's years back, I asked a Harvard professor, an economics Harvard professor, I was like, how can we make the case that learning through play and reflection and action will literally change the world? And he was like, listen, whoever doesn't get it, we don't need to make the case. The case is there. We don't need to make like a deep study and show the numbers. It's like, how can you not get that people learn better when they are awake and when they're connected and when they care about something? How can anyone not get that? But I'm still very much interested in that study, just because there are some people that don't get it. So it's definitely a need that we have. It's an obstacle, if you will. But I'm going back to your other point, is there are things that are really hard to measure. I'm sure they can be measured, but we just need to figure out the best way.
Yeah, actually, I believe we need to have all hands on the deck approach. You need policymakers, you need, politicians, you need international relevant specialists, institutions who are working in the field of development, because these people are already spending a lot of money, and they're spending most of the money on prevention preparation programs. These programs are not producing results. We have produced a massive amount of young people who are staying away from problem. We have produced, every year we produce so many graduates that they are struggling to have smooth transition towards adulthood. So we need to bring them on board, and we need to tell them, this is the missing link. unless and until you basically bring this component within the education system, you will never be able to get the desired results. Mathias was talking about, the need to develop relevant skills. Because I feel that, it's not about skills, it's more about establishing connections with the society. You see, change is the biggest enemy of education institutions. I know many professors, they woke up every day wishing internet or Google was not invented. And, this is the problem. And, they don't want to open it up. And we need to bring all these stakeholders who are putting money in education institutions, who are driving the policy. If they understand the importance of, bringing change making to the center of education institution, it would be very easy for us. And what we need to do is to, make sure that, this goes into the system, not only in the culture. Because most of the times when we talk about change making, we think of activities which are not part of the system. I really wanted to see that, it becomes part of the system in a way that, we develop a new sense of merit, a new sense of, timeline for young people. I know that young people have inherited a very lengthy timeline for success from adults. So we need to bring those adults into the discussion. So they need to understand that, young people can be successful at the age of 16, 17, and 18. Just look at the sports, just look at IT, look at music, how they're successful at this age, because they're taking the personal responsibility. But in education, that's the problem. They can't take the personal responsibility. In change making, the best thing is that you take the responsibility of your learning, you take the responsibility of your evaluation. So this really helps people and institutions to grow. And I hope that all these stakeholders come together, then we can have a very coordinated response. We don't need one service delivery mechanism. We need multiple players, and we need to develop performance measures for each of these players, and we need to monitor those performance measures on a regular basis so that we stay on the course.
Great.
I'm glad that we are all on the platform. And then the question should be, how do we get everybody into the room? Because we need everybody. Everybody, whoever is thinking tomorrow, this is not optional, because the focus here is on the changing world and the skills that kids need to have to thrive in the changing world. It's either our kids have the required skills or they will be missing out. So everybody needs to be in the room. The policymakers, the parents, the teachers, the school administrators, and everybody. So our focus and the question should be, how do we get everybody here? Because it is already here with us. The world is changing very fast. All right. So there are a set of skills that it's either our kids have the skills to thrive in the changing world, or our kids will be left out, and then they will become frustrated, and they'll become a problem to the society. They'll become a problem to the democratic system. They'll become a problem to the economy. They'll become a problem to everybody. So how do we get everybody into the room? That is the question. So I'm throwing that back to Kyle.
Well, I'll give you an answer. We've now reversed our roles completely, like good entrepreneurs. One thing I was thinking about as I was hearing you talk is, I remember a few years back, I was lucky enough to travel to China, and I was in rural China, and I was taking a long walk early in the morning with a colleague who was with me, and a boy ran by on a bicycle, and he had a thermos thing behind him full of Coca-Cola. And I remember, and I said to this person who lived in the area, this kid has like a huge amount of Coca-Cola, what's going on? And he said, well, that young man has figured out that he can sell Coca-Cola in his teeny tiny rural community. And he runs his bike into the city and buys Coca-Cola and sends it and drives it out. And he actually is supporting his family to a large extent. And for starters, you have to love a kid who's motivated like that. But the other thing that it made me think is, we are in a world where in rural China, there is, and I mean remote, there is a demand for Coca. Somehow we've been able to transmit that message to the far reaches of rural populations in the world. And I think to myself, what can we learn from a marketing perspective? And that, is not a framework that we often think about, our work, but what can we think about from a marketing perspective that we can learn from the private sector to get everyone in the room? Matthias, to answer your question that you posed to me. So I do wonder if there's a channel there that we should be stealing from a communication perspective. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Kyle, I think that's so hopeful, because it makes me feel like it's possible. I think one of the challenges that I experience, I'm sure we all do, is we'll share our vision for what school could be, and there's a response often from a variety of audiences of like, that would be great, but come on, you can't change this behemoth of a system, even in one city, much less a country or worldwide. And your point is you can create change if you have the right channels, if you get the right attention of the right people. And I suspect part of the answer is, and it's a question that we grapple with all the time, it has to do with how do we reach parents? If your child is thriving, that's important to you, whoever you are, wherever you live. And if your child is not thriving, or is suffering, or is being limited in their potential, that's a huge problem. I think the challenge is so often that happens, but parents are unaware of it because we see, yeah, my kid's not very good at subject X, Y, or Z. That's just how it is. You don't recognize that your child actually has the potential to be a change maker because you haven't seen it. It isn't yet the norm.
Right.
So it seems to me that's part of the answer. How do we help parents see what's possible?
Great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dina.
I just wanted to say that how do we help parents to see that's possible, but how do we also help, as you said, like taking so many possible learnings from like the private sector. No, we partner a lot with private sector across industries. And we've just learned so much by their know-how and their logistics and just scaling. And we have seen that there's a lot more opportunity to play with adults from the private sector than from the public sector, incredibly so. No, we have had trouble like inviting a minister of education to play. Like some of them will stand like back and watch. And if we invite them to play, usually with private sector is more like they're willing to take more risks, right? So who do we need in the room? Definitely, like Mathias said, everyone. But it's also like, how do we learn from those we play with? And how do we learn from those that don't want to play because they feel like they're going out of their comfort zone? How do we invite them in a different way?
I think that's really important, Dina, because I think there are a lot of educators, and First Book works with hundreds of thousands of them, and they are overwhelmed. There's a crisis in the profession in the US, lots of people leaving the field. I suspect, you're nodding, I suspect this is not a problem that is exclusive to the US. And this could be heard mistakenly, could be heard as one more thing they're not doing right. So I do think that, that our messaging, our work with educators and the educational system has to be carefully crafted because I believe that the teachers we work with feel like they're under siege and are in a, they're in a crouch at the moment, the whole profession. So one thing I want to say is we've got questions rolling in, some of them in the chat, and I might have missed a few of them. So I would encourage people to, toss a question on there. We've got about 20 minutes left, and I thought we would grab a few of those. I know, Aleta, you had seen a question or two that was intriguing to you, And so if I've missed the question, I'm seeing one that says, how do we both celebrate youth and individuals' abilities to be change makers and acknowledge that they have to work within the real limits of human and natural systems? So does anybody want to take a crack at that?
I'm happy to, and I'll try to address it along with a related question that came in that says, is there any risk in our emphasis on youth change making to push kids into adulthood too soon? Is it not a failure of the adults that requires children to participate in solving social problems rather than reading a book, learning an instrument, playing with abandon? I love that phrase, playing with abandon. So yes, it is of course a failure of adults that we're that our kids are going to have to figure out climate change and war and all the other extraordinary problems we've created, of course. And in the spirit of improv, yes, and change making certainly can and does look like grappling with huge social issues. And at Inspired Teaching, we run a program called Speak Truth, where we bring together high schoolers to lead each other in discussions around everything from racism to the elections here in the US to gentrification, every kind of issue. And at the same time, change making also can be and is a very playful, joyful task. So I'll give an example of a 3-year-old classroom, right? Where the challenge may be, we have to build a bridge and all we have is paper towel rolls and toothpicks and we don't have any tape. What are we going to do? How are we going to figure it out? That's also change making. It's problem solving. It's collaborating. It's seeing yourself as the child, as a person with agency. One of the core elements that guides our work is the idea of student as emerging expert. So that's what change making, what I understand change making to be. So it can be as simple as, hey guys, we have only 15 minutes left and we have 10 people who want to share their ideas. How many minutes does everybody get? Can you all figure out a solution to this problem? That's change making in a much less grandiose way than looking at social problems. But if you allow students to get in the habit of turning first to themselves rather than to an authority figure to solve a problem, even if the problem is tying a shoe. First, I'm going to see if I can do it myself before I ask for help. If I get in the habit of learning that way, then when I am faced with the extraordinary social problems that are more appropriate for young adults and adults to navigate, I'm in the habit of thinking, I bet I can take a stab at this. I bet I can make some change. And that's the kind of habit of mine that this kind of work can inculcate, while still very much respecting the necessary time of youth and the opportunity to play with abandon. And I want to, in that, address another question I thought was so important. What about teachers' unions? At Inspired Teaching, we've worked with teachers' unions nationally, but especially locally with the Washington Teachers Union, which is the local chapter of the American Federation of Teachers. And we do our very best to say, we are not fighting about whether you should have public or private or charter. We believe everybody should have a great teacher, and every teacher has the capacity to be great if we expect that and if we support the teachers the right way. And what we found in that attitude is unions love to be a part of this work, because unions at their core want their teachers to be happy and successful, right? That's the idea. And so when teachers get to think like improvisers and see the results and say, you know what, I actually like being with my students instead of how I used to get a stomach ache every day, then they're happier and they're better at their jobs, and the unions are happy and the teachers are happy. So while I realize that's an oversimplification, I do believe that ultimately we have a shared goal, which is that teachers will be happy and thriving and students will be happy and thriving. And that's where we ought to start in any kind of collaboration.
Yes.
I very much agree with Aleta on this. And I want to add that the best education is one that opens learners' minds to think critically. and it opens learners' hearts to embrace one another, even when they disagree. They still appreciate one another and they grow together. And the best also, it's one that opens learners' hands to go practical. And with courage and cooperation, I think bringing all the stakeholders together into the space of education, we can give birth to the society of our dreams. Now, the bulk of the thing is for everybody to see and understand what we need in the changing world. If we see and understand that the world is changing and that all our kids need certain skills to be able to approach the new world and be able to play the new game, every parent who wants his own child to excel in the new world. Every teacher wants his own children to excel. Every administrator wants his own children to excel. The policymakers will have no option. So we have to just open it, let everybody understand that the world is changing and that kids need certain skills to be able to operate and to be able to thrive in the new world, in the changing world. I think that is the ball that is before us that we all need to play.
Absolutely.
Just to add, go ahead.
Oh, no, I think what Mathias is saying and Aleta also is like change making doesn't need to be something necessarily, or not necessarily, it doesn't need, it's not scary, or it can also look like this. It can also look like this. So just to throw a visual of what it means, like these girls are superheroes, they're finding the different SDGs, they're playing together to do it, they're finding a way from their community to think about these great global challenges in a way that's not scary or threatening or paralyzing, because it's very much finding people where they're at, no, and understanding that we will not solve any issue if we are paralyzed with fear, which is very much happening. For example, with climate change, we have eco-anxiety now in so many young people, no, which is not something that will allow us to keep on building. We have to find the ways to go back to basics, if you will, and to search for this change-making possibility, which can be joyful and can be it needs to be participatory and iterative and meaningful. And so yes, I mean, our work with unions have been also really important. We if I could say, like, we have our best friends are teachers across the board, and we have found, for example, that we co-created a book for all 6th graders to be change makers. I'm gonna share it in the chat. It's in Spanish, but it's like a government initiative together with Education for Sharing. And so it is possible, you know, to work in a very intimate way against all odds.
Yeah, just quickly. I feel that change making begins with personal transformation, and this personal transformation leads to societal transformation. You know, when we talk about social entrepreneurship, business entrepreneurship, we mostly focus on the society. The best thing about change making is that we try to think and act differently. You know, the best thing happened, what I've observed over the last few years, that change making helps students, especially young people, to correct their belief system. You know, I believe that right belief system is more important than the right education. You know, young people are going to education institutions without bringing any change in their belief system. They still think and act in the same way. But the moment they get involved in the change making, what happens? They knock out this childhood from them, and you know, they start interacting with the society. They get this first-hand information about the pain and the sufferings of the people, and it has a huge impact on them. So I think, you know, change making is a very powerful personal tool, and it really transforms you first from inside. It heals you from inside, and then it basically moves out, and it helps society at large.
I would like to, it's such a fascinating conversation, and I'm mindful of the clock. And there's there's one question, actually I have 3 questions, but I doubt whether I get to all 3 of them, but there's one I want to make sure that that we all answer, and that is, if I'm an educator and I'm listening to this discussion, or I'm a principal, or I have a program that has reach over young people's lives, where do I go? Let's get tactical for a second. Where do I go? Where, some of the websites, some of the things that have been shared in the chat, I encourage everyone to take a look, because there are tremendous things that have been shared by the panelists and by others. But what advice would you give somebody who's listening and who wants to jump into this? Where do they go?
Okay, I think, there is a lot of material available on, internet. I have written 2 books about change-making intelligence and what is change-making. Plus, I can see there are many Ashoka fellows that are involved in, in starting change-making programs all over the world. I think Ashoka could be the first starting point to get in touch with all those fellows that are involved in change-making. Probably they can share the experiences and they can share the models. The model I am implementing in Pakistan is very simple. It's based on 4 steps. We just bring top leadership on board. We give them a trust-based investment. It's a very small amount, from starting from $1 to $25 on the condition. If there is any loss, we will take it. And if there is any profit, they can take away 50% and they donate 50% to us. And then we give them a very short time period to go out and practice change making. And lastly, we give them reward and recognition. So there are many ways to start this program. Probably I think that Ashoka can play a very big role in it, because I know many fellows have gone very far in terms of embedding this concept. So probably as an institution, I think Ashoka can offer tremendous support to those people who are about to start this journey.
And if I would add, I will recommend whoever is thinking of jumping into this to go into Ashoka program, this Your Kids program. It's having some very good elements that are open for everybody, either a school setting or parent group or whatever organization you find yourself. The Your Kids is developed for parents, for teachers, and it's presenting some 4 basic elements that everybody can embrace to as a change maker. When you go into cognitive empathy, talking about sophisticated collaborative skills, the leadership styles, and then the change making, everybody can go into this. And then Ashoka also is leading on everyone a change maker each. Now, these are worldwide and open everywhere. And you can just place a call and we will talk more, since we are all here, our contacts are all here. It's a thing that must be done and we have to go on it. Call us anywhere, we can do it visually and we can come in person, but our emphasis is that everybody must be in it. It is not just a nice to do thing, it is a must do thing now, because the world is fast changing and we want to be together.
Yes, I would just add that there's so many like low-hanging fruits and very quick places to go to find this kind of access to materials that are free, that are downloadable, that are like ready to be used and played with. Of course, like we've shared a lot of different possibilities across the chat, but as Mathias say, like the Ashoka fellows is just like a humongous, never-ending pool of resources, no, to be used. So start with the ones on the chat, and please reach out if you feel like you want more, or you want to know from other initiatives. We're very proud about the other Ashoka fellows as well.
Yeah, if it's not already in the chat, Bhumi, you can put in, there's an extraordinary tool, Everyone a Changemaker, and it's a little quiz that you and your students can take. That's a fabulous tool that Ashoka has created. And I'll add 2 other things. One is that you can do on your own. if you can carve, teachers and school leaders, if you can carve out 15 minutes just to devote to listening to the students in your class, that can mean all kinds of things. It can mean a suggestion box. It can mean a conversation. It can mean that you just let them do their work and you walk around with a notebook and listen. You will have so much to start with from a change maker perspective. They're going to tell you what they need. They're going to show you what they can contribute. It's really simple, but it's not the norm. So that's one thing I strongly encourage you to do. And then one more resource that I'll share that we have in Inspired Teaching. We want to, you can't do, I mean, you can do it alone, but it sure is better to be part of a community. And we are doing, thanks to the pandemic, monthly free online inspired teaching institutes in exactly this work. And Michelle will drop in the chat the registration. We have one coming up in a few weeks in April, and then every month from here on in. We're also doing them in person for anyone in DC, but also online. That's a place to learn these skills and begin to find your people, find your community of experienced change makers or people who are change maker curious and would like to, like, I'd like to try it. I don't know, but I want to check it out. And to your very important point, Kyle, teachers and school leaders across the world are exhausted. They're quitting at high levels. And so it's I do my best, and I know my colleagues on this panel also do, to both challenge teachers and also recognize that, like, this is not, okay, go from 0 to 100. How can you care for yourself while also being your best self and bringing that to the students? And we work very hard at balancing that self-care and wellness focus with also a change maker focus, because getting more sleep for myself and eating better food is something for me being a change maker, and for many of our teachers too, and that counts too. So we really try to bring all that together in our work with teachers, and I'd encourage teachers and school leaders to remember caring for yourself, that counts as change making.
Critically important. As I'm listening to you, and I know we only have a couple of minutes left, I think I've been doing my work for, longer than I care to do the math on, and like many of you, and I know how complicated these problems are. I know how deeply rooted a lot of the issues that the entire social sector is addressing or trying to address. And I know that there is no single solution to any, to the climate change, to the health and wellness, mental wellness issues. I understand this, but the deeper I get into change making, the more I see the power of it, not just for the individual child, but for their school, their community, their country, and at the global level. And it begins to feel like the thread that connects all the great battles that we know we're fighting now and we know will come in the future. And I think with this fast-paced world that Mathias reminded us, it's moving very, very quickly. All of us know that we have to raise kids with a muscle that recognizes them, that allows them to recognize themselves as change makers, because we can't win these fights without them, right? It's the demands are getting bigger. The world is moving faster. We need them to be full participants. And so there's a moment in time for a lot of social movements where you really see that on-ramp to either a powerful solution or a real tragedy. And I think we've reached that moment in a lot of issues that we're facing. And I have to say, I personally believe that change making is the driver as to whether we end up on that on-ramp heading toward powerful solutions, or whether we're going to be confronting tragedies that are avoidable, they're avoidable. And so I'm tremendously inspired by each one of you. I really see my own organization, we are beginning to turn a lot of what we're doing and trying to elevate this among our own community. I want to urge all of us to develop stronger collaborative links, because I also think that our sector isn't very good at that, right? Because we're all so busy. We all have, the death grip on our own steering wheels. And it's very hard for us to reach over and have that bandwidth to reach over. But what that means is we make the same mistakes around the world, big and small, and we're missing the opportunity to learn from each other and advance more quickly. That's the power of this conversation this morning. That's the power of all the learning that you guys brought into this conversation. You've completely inspired me. I'm ready to, race into my office and make everyone clear their desks. So I really appreciate each one of you. It's really a tremendous 90 minutes. Thank you so much. To everyone who's listening, thanks for your time. Please jump onto the chat and let us know if there's more you want to hear about, if there are connections you want to make. But thank you, everybody, for your time.
Very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thanks, everyone.